Praia da Luz, Portugal, a holiday resort where a quiet evening would become one of the most enduring mysteries of our time. A 3-year-old's toy, ordinary and ordinary again, becomes an emblem of a life interrupted. Night rituals, a window latch, a last check, ordinary acts that establish the timeline of what followed. On the night in question, a small bed held a sleeping child, and then, at a point between checks, she was not there. The first call set in motion local Portuguese inquiries, and then an international storm of attention. Detectives built a map of events, a geography that investigators would consult for years. CCTV and witness sightings produced silhouettes and timings, fragments that demanded careful matching. Footprints, cigarette ends, a time-stamped presence, small details that could be cross-referenced. Forensic teams recorded impressions in minute detail, each mark cataloged as a potential lead. Pieces of cloth, marks on furniture, each item could be a trace of what happened that evening. Samples were taken and preserved, the scientific thread that the investigation would later follow. That night, appeals for information spread globally, and the story gripped public attention. Families and communities marked the absence with vigils and leaflets, attempts to keep a face in the public mind while protecting privacy. Information flowed between agencies and countries, and the case took on procedural complexity very quickly. Portuguese investigators questioned many people early on, and the inquiry took several different investigative directions. Items were sealed, filed, and archived, evidence for now, and perhaps answers later. UK detectives from Operation Grange later brought new resources and fresh lines of inquiry to the case. Large, methodical searches along the coast and surrounding areas looked for anything that might be connected. Public memory kept the case in view as investigators traced a long list of witness accounts and leads. Witness statements and CCTV stills were archived and re-examined as assumptions changed. There were repeated witness accounts of people seen in the area that night. Timing was everything. The parents' routine that evening, dining within earshot, has been central to timelines constructed by investigators and commentators alike. Timelines were disputed, reconstructed, and scrutinized, every minute open to interpretation. The global press raised questions. The family responded publicly while the police continued private lines of inquiry. Legal advisors and private investigators became part of the story, adding more layers to what was already complex. Portuguese police conducted interviews that led to multiple lines of inquiry, some of which were later closed. Vehicles and movements of people were examined, including multiple searches of cars in the days after the disappearance. Court proceedings and legal reviews followed later on different strands connected to the wider investigation. Legal filings and statements became part of a public record that would be dissected repeatedly. The media cycle amplified leads and theories, some helpful, some distracting. High-profile searches were launched, with multi-agency teams combing areas and following every credible lead. Searches covered cliff paths, scrub, and beaches, each sweep a hope for a breakthrough. Microscopic analysis compared fibers, hair, and other particles recovered from various locations. Item by item, the investigators tried to connect material traces to plausible movements and possibilities. Database checks were run across nations and years, building a picture from distributed pieces of information. Coordination across jurisdictions tested systems, and at times, patience and trust. Journalists pursued leads that sometimes advanced the story, and sometimes created distractions and friction. Investigators tied sightings and movements together to build plausible routes and timelines. Vehicles were traced, checked, and rechecked as part of the detective work across borders. Material traces were matched where possible, narrowing some leads and diverting others. Not every test produced answers. Many routes led to further questions and more searching. Years of unanswered questions left many communities unsettled, and many families in grief. Occasionally, renewed searches sought to answer new tips or to re-examine earlier areas for overlooked clues. Soil, pollen, and small traces were analyzed to try and place movements across environments. International travel logs and movement checks were amongst the many lines investigators explored. Anniversaries and anniversaries of searching kept the case alive in public memory and investigation files. Legal processes and investigative reviews continued across years, even as the central question remained unanswered. The search for answers continues, and if you can help, you are asked to contact the investigators who remain committed to finding the truth.